In the game of Worldle, you're shown the outline of a country and you are given 6 guesses to identify that country. With each guess, you're shown how far away you are and what direction you need to move. So it obviously helps to have a good knowledge of geography and where countries are located relative to each other. But what if you could just simply look at the shape of a country and know immediately what it is? So that's what I'm trying to do in this video. In this video, I'm going to cover about half of the countries of the continent of Africa. I do need to issue a disclaimer. I'm going to be using some very ridiculous images and wordplay to help us remember the name of each country based on its shape. Mnemonics in general work better the more ridiculous they are because they stick in your memory more. However, no offense is intended to the countries shown or their citizens. Let's start with the first country. When I look at this, I definitely see a face looking up and to the left. I can see the neck, the collar down here. So let's draw that in, a collar and a tie. And then let's fill in the face. I see someone with his chin up in the air, his nose in the air, and this mass of hair on top of his head. And I imagine that he is called Algernon. And that name Algernon helps me remember that this country is Algeria. So when we see this shape, we picture Algernon and we remember Algeria. This country, the first thing that jumps out at me is that little blue bit, a little bonus section of the country. We might think at first that it is an island, but notice that the north border is a straight line. So this is one of those rare cases where a country has some land that is non-contiguous. So we can think of this section as being and. It's a little extra bit. Now what's going on over in the eastern half? Well, with those straight lines down in the bottom right, they look to me like the goalposts and the goal line for football or soccer if you prefer. And then that whole section on the right could be a footballer with a giant hand for some reason, but he is shouting out goal. He is celebrating. So we have and with goal should remind us that this is Angola. And goal, Angola. The lower half of this country is unusually straight, and then this bulging bit at the top. And it makes me think of a Pez dispenser. So whose head is on this Pez dispenser? Well, this section in the northwest looks to me like a powdered wig. And so I think of someone like Benjamin Franklin. And if you take the start of Benjamin's name and the end of Franklin, you get Benin. So when we see this shape like a Pez dispenser of Benjamin Franklin, we think Benin. There are 2 interesting sections of this country. On the left, you have the straight lines that look to me like a robot, or we can say bot for short. Over on the right, it almost looks like a mirror image, which calls to mind a swan floating in the water, reflected. Of course, without the head of the swan. So we have a bot and a swan, helps us remember Botswana. A robot, a swan, Botswana. I'm immediately drawn to this section here, and it reminds me of Shrek, or as he might be known cruelly to some people, Fatso. And he seems to be riding on something or someone. Well, the main part of the country has this triangular shape, which calls to mind the Greek letter delta. And when I think of delta, I think of everyone's favorite TV actress, Delta Burke. So we have Burke and Fatso, which gives us Burkina Faso. So again, seeing the shape of Shrek and Delta Burke, we get Burkina Faso. For this shape, the first thing that sticks out to me is that pointy bit up in the northern section, which looks like somebody smoking a cigar, and I immediately think of Burt Reynolds. Man, did he love his cigars. And he seems to be in a pair of underwear, or undies, giving us Burundi. Burt, undies, Burundi. I think it's impossible to look at this country without picturing a chicken or a hen or some kind of bird. We won't discuss what is coming out of its rear end, But I want you to pay attention to the coxcomb or the tuft at the top of the head. And notice the way it is sticking up and swept a bit to the left, which reminds me of Cameron Diaz in the film There's Something About Mary. And Cameron will help us remember Cameroon. So the chicken with the tuft is Cameroon. This next country is actually a series of islands. And the first island that jumps out at me is this one here, which looks to me like a superhero, in this case a super dog, and he has a cape flowing behind him. And this superhero is on a mission for his friends. There's a piece of broccoli and a purple hippo. There's a gorilla and a cool pineapple. And then there's a potato and whatever that other thing is. And the superhero with his cape is flying up to the clouds to see the great Italian composer Verdi. And he might be asking Verdi to write an opera all about his friends. So the Cape and Verdi helps us remember the Cape Verde Islands. Paradolia is the tendency to see shapes, particularly faces, when we look at an object. And I definitely see 3 faces here. There's one on the left, and we can imagine this guy saying, "Go left." There's an old guy over on the right, and he's saying, "Go right." But there's this lady in the middle, and she's just saying, "Stay in the center." Well, the left and the right guy cancel each other out, and so they do end up being very central, and that helps us remember Central African Republic, right in the middle of the continent of Africa. So when I look at this country, I see a face again, and it seems to be a guy with his mouth hanging open, maybe not the sharpest tool in the shed. So I'm going to give him the name Chad, and I probably in my disclaimer should have apologized to people named Chad, no offense intended to them. But what's going on with his head here? We see these straight lines. It looks to me like he is hanging out of a skylight, and so we might remember Hanging Chad. So when we see the shape of a face, a head hanging down, then we think of Chad. Here's another island nation, and I just look at those and I immediately see a dog's face. And the dog has his ear perked up, listening to his master's voice on the gramophone. He's listening to beloved crooner Perry Como for the Comoros. So the dog listening to Perry Como is Comoros. I think it's impossible to look at this shape and not see King Kong practicing, maybe it's karate, but we're going to say kung fu. So King Kong doing kung fu. And the important thing to remember is that doing kung fu is not democratic, because this is simply the Republic of the Congo. So King Kong, Congo, but not the Democratic Republic, which we're going to see next, but just simply the Republic of the Congo. Okay, this one, again I see somebody in a powdered wig, and it is Louis XVI of France, and it looks like he has been beheaded on the guillotine, ushering in a democratic republic in France for the first time. And so seeing a king executed should make us think of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This shape reminds me of somebody kneeling down before their king, and they're offering this treasure, and they are saying, "Your booty, my lord," which sounds a bit like Djibouti. And so when we see this shape of somebody offering up this treasure, we think of Djibouti. There are times when you look at a shape and I think you should actually just recognize the country itself. It's so well known. And that's the case, I think, with Egypt. You have the Red Sea leading up to the Suez Canal. You have those very straight borders with Libya and Sudan. And so when we see this shape, I think it's easy enough to remember that this is Egypt. But if you still need a reminder, here's a dragon being ridden by the Prince of Egypt. So either way, this is Egypt. The first thing I notice for this shape is the equal sides on the right-hand half. So that makes us think of the word equal. And then the whole shape looks like some kind of rodent, perhaps a guinea pig. So we have equal, guinea pig helps us remember Equatorial Guinea. Equatorial Guinea. This shape, I think it's impossible to look at without thinking of an elephant and its trunk, but it looks like the trunk has sprung a leak. So the elephant's name we're going to remember is Eric, and Eric's trunk has a leak, and if we take some of those letters, we get Eritrea. So again, Eric, the elephant, his trunk has sprung a leak, Eritrea. I see two faces in this shape, one looking to the left, one looking to the right. And specifically, I see from the Muppet Show, Statler and Waldorf. But their names begin with S and Wa. And then up in the top right, there's a little green Muppet called Teeny. And altogether that gives us Eswatini. So again, Statler and Waldorf, S and Wa, and Teeny, Eswatini. For this shape, I definitely see a hedgehog up in the top section. And we're going to call him Eddie the Hedgehog, and we're going to remember those initials. And he is operating a snowplow. So Eddie the Hedgehog is operating plow, and he's going through alphabet soup. So if you take those letters, ignoring the word soup, we get Ethiopia. All you really need to remember is Eddie the Hedgehog, Ethiopia. For this country, in the bottom left, I definitely see a horse's head, and it looks like the horse is trying to buck its rider. And the rider is this little guy called Gabby, and Gabby is doing his best to grab on, which helps us remember Gabon. So when we see this shape that looks like a horse and little Gabby trying to grab on, we remember Gabon. For this shape, I see a face over on the right-hand side, and it looks like somebody talking. Maybe they're counting to 100 because they're playing hide-and-seek with their friend who's over here on the left. And the friend is hiding behind a tree trunk. Finally, the guy who's the seeker, he reaches 100 and he says, "Ready or not, I'm gonna find you," which helps us remember Ghana. So again, this person going to find the other guy who's hiding behind the tree, Ghana. This country has a very unusual shape. The West Coast looks to me like paper being shredded. I'm imagining that it's a banknote that some countries used to have the guinea, and it's being shredded by our favorite rodent, the guinea pig, because this country is simply Guinea. So guinea note and guinea pig, Guinea. Here's something else that's being shredded. So of course we have a guinea pig again. But this time he's got a thirst for blood, unfortunately, and he is shredding a bishop. And the bishop is saying, ow, and that helps us remember Guinea-Bissau. Again, a guinea pig attacking a bishop who's saying, ow, Guinea-Bissau. This country looks to me like somebody looking to their left with a funny mouth, and if we fill in a face for this person, to me it looks like Quasimodo, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Let's give him some teeth. And the hunchback lived in a tower that was part of Notre Dame Cathedral. We can call that an ivory tower, and that will help us remember Ivory Coast. So when we see the Hunchback of Notre Dame, we think Ivory Coast. For this country, we're again going to use a little bit of geography. I'm going to put in the borders and show you the name of its neighbors, and it's also on the Indian Ocean. To me, this country looks like it wants to be five-sided, but each of its neighboring countries is taking away some of its land. They are squeezing in on it, and the section down on the Indian Ocean looks like a face. And the person here is saying, "Can you give me some room?" which helps us remember Kenya. So this shape with the squeezed in sides, Kenya. When I look at this country, I see a face in the western border, but in particular I see this very flat forehead, which makes me think of Frankenstein's monster. But the back half of the country reminds me of the hair of the bride of Frankenstein. So it's as if Dr. Frankenstein has combined the two into one creature, and we're going to remember this creature is named Leslie, which can be a man's name or a woman's name, or Les for short. And that will help us remember Lesotho. So when we see Frankenstein's monster with the bride of Frankenstein hair, Lesotho. This shape looks to me like a bear giving a thumbs up. And let's call him Little Bear. And it looks like he was locked into a cellar, but now he has been liberated. And Little Bear liberated will remind us of Liberia. So again, this shape of the bear, Liberia. This country, the way it is sticking out with those straight lines on the bottom and the right, looks to me like a gargoyle hanging on the side of a medieval cathedral. And gargoyle I'm going to associate with Gaddafi, the former leader of Libya. So when I see this shape that looks like a gargoyle, I'm going to think of Gaddafi and Libya. If you found this useful, please leave a comment. Let me know what continent you'd like me to do next. Thanks for watching.